You know, man, God has blessed me with a heart and a mind and a soul. And the heart and the soul to never give up, to never quit, to not stop.
And so this might just be the most inspirational story in all of sports. An Alabama man without limbs fishing and competing on the pro bass circuit.
Yeah, only on WVTM 13, Rick Carley found himself in awe when he grabbed a fishing pole and soaked in some of Clay Dyer's inspiration.
Welcome to The Beginning, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories behind the anglers, the battles they've fought, and the moments that define their journey. Today, we're joined by one of the most inspiring figures in professional fishing, Clay Dyer. Born without lower limbs, a left arm, and only a partial right arm, Clay has defied all odds to compete at the highest levels of competitive fishing. His story is one of resilience, faith, and pure determination. Today's podcast is hosted by Jordan Werner. You can learn about Jordan by visiting younghammer.com or catch him online at Jordan Werner Fishing. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast so you do not miss our future episodes.
Sweet. So everybody, we got Clay Dyer here today, and we're just going to get into it today and just talk fishing, hear about Clay's story. So, yeah, anything you want to say to get started, Clay? Introduce yourself.
Hey, Jordan, man, just thanks for having me on, buddy. It was really cool when I researched your podcast, man. I thought it was really cool what you're doing, and you're going about it the right way, man. I appreciate the opportunity of coming on, and we're going to have a good time, buddy.
Yeah. So let's get started. What is your earliest memory of fishing? How did that first experience shape the love for the sport?
You know, my first really memory, I was sitting in my granddad's lap on the bank of his catfish pond, and he did like a little catfish farm kind of thing on the side as like a second career, if you will. And I was sitting on his lap, and I had my old Zebco Scooby rod or Snoopy. You know, threw it out there, and lo and behold, I hooked the catfish and got it up there. And when I got it to the bank, it broke my line right at the bank. So I basically jumped out of his lap in the edge of the pond, and I wasn't gonna let this catfish get away from me. And it weighed probably about. We didn't have scales, but looking back, it probably weighed about, I don't know, 5 or 6 pounds. And I'd made up my mind I wasn't going to let it get away from me, but I didn't know I could swim at the time, and he didn't either. So I think I gave him about a heart attack, but we got the fish, and we both survived.
There you go.
But, you know, with that being said, it's funny looking back how, you know, you don't really realize at the time. Of course, at the time, I was like 4 years old. And you don't realize at the time at those moments at where they take you, you know, in life. And, you know, it really ignited the fire. And, you know, I've always been a competitor. I've always loved playing sports and loved the outdoors. And, excuse me, as, you know, as I started getting older and watching like bass fishing shows on TV and, you know, coming home from Sundays after church and watching the Bassmasters on TNN, that tells my age, man. You can tell I'm an old man now. And but you know, watching all that, you know, was kind of opened that avenue up, you know. And I never would have thought that, you know, way back then, you know, what passion that was igniting.
Yeah. That's cool. My earliest memory is I was fishing a little pond out here in Utah, and I was reeling in a bluegill, and like a 5-pounder just came and like blew it off the surface. I was using like a maybe like 3-foot Zebco Princess push button rod. With that, it was super light. Like, it was craziness. It just crushed it off the surface. I was like, okay, I like this.
And snatched your brim, didn't he?
Yeah, I was just looking at the water. I was like, oh my gosh.
That's cool, dude. That is really cool.
It was something else. I was just like, yeah, maybe I want to do this. And then fast forward a couple of years, I played baseball from, I think, not 5 to like 15 or something like that.
Yes,
14.
sir.
And then I was like, I found bass fishing again. And then I started fishing youth tournaments and then just went from there.
That's awesome, man. Good deal, dude.
Yeah, it was cool. See what else we got here. Tournament fishing is already a mental and physical grind for any angler. What's been the hardest day you've had on the water, and what did it teach you?
Um, I'd probably say the hardest day I've ever had on the water. There's been a couple of them. Obviously, the harder days for me were it was from a weather standpoint. Uh, I'm kind of I won't mention the name of the company because it was years ago, and then they actually make some really good stuff now. But back then, I had a company send me a new rain suit, and we were getting ready for our first term of the year. It was in March. We were in nasty cold, and sleeting and raining and all that good stuff. And ordinarily, I'd never been the type to test or try something new, on a tournament day like that. And I was like, oh well, it's long story short, we go out there, and I actually started kind of getting hot first thing that morning because of everything I had on. So I unzipped my rain jacket and took my hoodie off, and I put it in the storage, and I had another one on under it. So anyway, I proceeded to find out that rain suit basically soaked up water like a sponge, and I was soaked and freezing by like 8:30 that morning. Ended up finding a place finally kind of out of the weather just a little bit up under the edge of a dock, and got my dry hoodie out, and I basically stripped down to my base layer, and but still I was so wet down there and everything. I didn't have a towel in the boat. I was so miserable and cold that I had never came in early in a tournament, and actually won my very first tournament in conditions very similar to that. And kind of the same thing happened that day, but that day it was my fault. Process of culling a fish. But anyway, getting through that day, and actually I came in about an hour and a half early. I mean, I was in pretty bad shape, but my co-angler, I was real worried about them because they were like controllably. I was beginning to think they had hypothermia or something. And so I came in that day, and it really I'm a very like most of the time I'm a very hot natured person, and I know when I got back to the house we were staying in at that tournament, my wife literally took my clothes and she wring water out of them, into the bathtub, and I ended up zeroing that day, obviously, and it was one of those days, and at the end of that day, I mean, it taught me a lot of great things, but it also is one of those things that made me realize to never, never any time in my book, but especially when you got really adverse weather conditions like that, to never try, something like that, because it was one of those things where I'm pretty darn tough, and I was so cold at like 1 o'clock. I kind of think I was in like the beginning stages, maybe of hypothermia or something, because it was even hard to think and all that. And so yeah, that was probably my most challenging tournament day, just getting through those conditions and being wet, and being miserable and all that. And Lord knows it taught me a lot.
Yeah, those days like when it's super cold, like you're like just everything like wants to lock up, and like
Yeah,
I went out with my buddy the other morning, and it was so cold outside when we were reeling our baits back, and we were creating icicles at the end of our rods.
I've been there and done that, buddy. I learned that the hard way too.
Yeah.
The tournament I was telling you about that I won. I kind of had the same thing happening, and we didn't have a heater in the boat. What I was doing that day, I had a towel that I had put in my pocket, and I didn't have gloves on that day. I finally some of these gloves now I can put on gloves and I can make them work, but back then I didn't have gloves, and man, my hands were so cold that I'd end up, they were numb a lot of times. So I'd actually put them in my pocket down in. I was trying to warm them up some, but I kept, I didn't have any kind of sprays or anything put on my rod, so I kept having to just, slap my rod in the water and move it around and get the ice out of it. But yeah, I've been there with you, buddy. I know what you mean.
Yeah, and then like it gets up into your reel and you cast, you blow up on your reel. It sucks. It's that's when it starts to become one of those mornings. You're like, oh man.
I've learned since then when if it's going to buddy heater in the boat with me where I can put it up on the front deck and put it close enough to my rods, and I put some. Usually, if it's gonna be like that, I take some of that. Vicious makes a spray that I take and spray on my rods. It's like the line conditioner spray, and it will, and it does a whole lot better.
Good to know. Did you ever have a mentor get going into the sport, or did you do it by yourself? If you did,
Well, actually, kind of to both questions, I was very blessed to have some great mentors. Not my family, and then I was very blessed early on, to meet some of the legends. I met Kevin Van Dam early on, and met Jay Ellis, and a lot of those greats, and thankfully they kind of took me under their wing, and Jay and Kevin, and I was blessed to get on the Strike King Pro Team, early on in my career. Kind of took me under their wing, and I didn't have to. They just, I think they could see my drive, to compete, and my drive to be the best I could be, and so they took me under their wing, and they really helped. And I'm still to this day, I'm personal friends with them. Get to talk to them quite often. I helped Jay Ellis with some Cash for Kids events, and I'm not, obviously not with Strike King anymore. Strike King was really good to me. They were really good company, and I had some really good people.
yeah,
But yes, I was blessed to meet a lot of those legends, if you will. And as I say, still personal friends with them, still stay in touch with them as far as teaching me. Um, I like the way my dad said, or my mom and him both said it actually. He said, um, with you being born the way you were, nobody really kind of outside of the couple I've seen like Hunter Ballman and a couple more. I mean, Hunter, I've never even met him face to face, but watching Hunter do his thing is very admirable, and seeing his faith and how he just, man, he don't let nothing hold him back. And my parents used to say that with my body being the way it was, nobody could really teach me because nobody was like me. They tried, and of course, they were there to help in any way they could, but it was more of a let me watch how this other person, same type of rod and reel, whether it was a bait caster or a spinning reel and rod. Let me go get that and let me try it. And it was trial and error over and over and over and over and over continuously, until I figured out what worked for me, and I mean, even to this day, Jordan, there's a lot of things that, I'm going on 30 years and doing this. And still to this day, there's a lot of things that I am constantly trying to figure out if the way I do it is the most efficient way, or if there's a way I can do it, faster.
that's cool. You're good buddies with Scott Canterbury, right?
I don't claim him, but yeah.
Yeah.
No, Scott's my buddy. Scott was actually he was in me and my wife's wedding, and Scott and I used to room together. And I and Art Ferguson, we used to room together on the FLW tour when I fished FLW. But yeah, Scott and I go way back. We used to fish some team tournaments together, and we don't get to fish as much together anymore when we living in Tennessee and him and outside Birmingham. But we're still good buddies.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Scott's one of those you can kind of add to the list. He the people that were my mentors, even though he and I are closer in age, Scott really, he was there, just as a friend, as a buddy, and he was more advanced at his age than I was in bass fishing, and trying to offer up, tips and suggestions and trying to help me out, and I'll always appreciate that about him.
Yeah, he seems like a super cool guy.
He is, and don't let him fool you. He can cook too, man. That dude can make concrete taste good.
Yeah, that's cool. Love to have Scott on here. That'd be super cool.
Yeah, if you need his contact, let me know, man. I'll be glad to send him to you. I'm sure he'd be glad to.
For sure. Thank you. Can you tell us about a time when you surprised yourself on the water, whether it was a tournament win, a personal breakthrough, or just an unforgettable catch?
Yes, my very first tournament I've won, and in some of the other victories I've had, um, the very first one I won really surprised myself because I didn't, I as I've grown older in my career and gotten more experienced, and learned the fisheries now, even when you go somewhere, whether it's like where I'll be in 2 weeks at Sam Rayburn, there's giants that swim there, but you also realize that unless conditions line up, say perfect, um, there's a number that you need to get to in your head, or you think there is, and you think until you get to that number, you don't know because you know how good the anglers are, now, and now there's so many good anglers that back then, and this was a club tournament I won, but we had one of the strongest clubs in the state of Alabama. We had several guys that, in my opinion, on their fishing ability alone, could do it and could compete, consistently with today's anglers. But back then, the sponsorships weren't there like they are now and stuff. And back then, those guys, their jobs, so they fished like the weekend stuff and federation events. And with that being said, when I got to I remember that day very vividly getting to I had like 5 fish that weighed like 8 pounds in the boat, and I'd culled a couple just ounces here and there. It was cold, miserable, wet day, and right toward the end of the day, we had about 20 minutes left, and we were about 5 minutes from the dock. About this little place. We pulled up, and it was some old trash, or I shouldn't say trash. It was like some brush and some wooden pallets that somebody had pulled out and sunk. And I threw a Carolina rig up there, and like first cast, I feel it load up and get heavy. And when I set the hook, I'm fighting it to the boat. And we actually had an anchor on the front of the boat and a rope because back then we didn't have a power pole. And I had anchored down. There was a creek we were fishing earlier that had a lot of current. So I'd anchored down in that creek in the area we were fishing. So anyway, I'm walking around the front deck and not used to having over that anchor, and I start to fall. And as I'm falling, I'm trying to catch myself without dropping my rod and reel. And as I pull up, as I'm falling back, my buddy happens to dip the fish. And as I'm falling, I actually fall off the front deck down in the bottom of the boat. And as I fell, and after the fish in the net, my buddy grabs the rod so it doesn't go in the lake. And so I got back, and with that 5 pounder, it ended up putting me over the top. And I won that tournament. But I had no clue, going back to the ramp, knowing club, I had no clue that I had it won. And other ones, that I've won, I kind of had that feeling like when I got to that number, I thought, I don't know that I've got it won, but man, they're going to have to catch them. Somebody's going to have to really have a bag to beat me. And but other times, man, I'll be honest, it was most of the time man, I don't like you're like 1 or 2 bites away, from being there.
Yeah, I was fishing a tournament down at Lake Mojave last weekend, and it's a smallmouth and largemouth fishery. So I was like, so we were fishing this tire line, and they're like way up under. I was like, I'm gonna flip these tires like I do at Clear Lake, like with a punching rig. So I
Right.
got a 1 ounce drop shot weight on a bait caster. I start flipping this drop shot, and I ended up punching a smallmouth through the tires. It was crazy. I was surprised with myself that I even did that.
Yes. That's pretty cool. I've seen people do that. I've never fished any of those lakes, but I've heard people talk about doing that, and that's pretty cool, dude.
Yeah, it was cool. What else do we got over here? Trying to find a good question. Good fun. There you go. If you could go back and talk to your young self just before his first tournament, what advice would you give him?
Um, say like I try to do every day now, in tournaments and stuff. I'd always just say, hey man, number one, pray. Number two, give it all you got. And when you do those two things and you give it all you've got, you have nothing at the end of the day to hang your head over. Whether you catch them or whether you don't, you have nothing to hang your head over. And I'd always say, never take for granted, being able to do it. Always be thankful that you can do it because it's like I say now, I can go to a lake sometimes and, dude, as frustrating as practice, I heard Gerald Swindle make this comment a couple of years ago, and Gerald and I we've been close friends for a long time. And when he said this one time, I didn't really know. It didn't really hit me what he meant. But he said, sometimes the man with nowhere to go is the most dangerous man. And sometimes that's right. When you're on a tough fishery, and let's just say the weights are very low, and takeoff is, they maybe have all the tournaments out of one area, and all those release fish get in there. Sometimes we make fishing a lot more complicated. Sometimes it's just a matter of putting that old Zoom worm on those St. Croix rod and some 15-pound vicious line, and just go fishing, man. Go fish whatever you see in front of you. And sometimes we want to get all technical with with all this stuff, and a fish is a fish is a fish, no matter where you put him at, no matter what lake you're on, what river system you are. They're just like other animals. In God's creation, man. They react, to their environment, and sometimes, in fishing, we really overthink it, and sometimes the best thing you can do is, get back to the basics and, just go fish. And that, that's what I would like to tell, basically is those three, those about four things is just, never take it for granted that you're able to do it, because, no time in my career, even when I've come in and I've had, a rough day and I've zeroed and just could never get it going, there's still been that young man, maybe just like yourself, that's come up to me and said, Mr. Clay, you're my, I really look up to you. You're living my dream. And it doesn't take but about zero point 0.5 seconds to make you realize that, as angry as you may be, as aggravated as you may be, as frustrated as you may be, it doesn't take you long to realize that, hey, there's a bigger purpose on why I do this. And you always got to remember, and I always say in a lot of my presentations and seminars, is when you have a passion and a drive and a desire to do a purpose to do something larger than yourself, you know that's when you realize what success is. And that's basically in a nutshell what I would tell, is those handful of things, because I think those are those are qualities that if you possess in anything in life, then you're going to be just fine.
Yeah, that's cool. What was the most what's your biggest success in the sport so far?
In the sport so far, probably, let's see. Well, I hadn't got a national win yet. We're working on that. But I'd have to say so far, you know, I guess as far as placement, the highest placement I had in the FLW was I tied for 51st at Lake Champlain. I mean, not Lake Champlain, Lake St. Clair, in the Chevy Open several years ago. But the last couple of years, well, I say the last couple of years, up until about 3 years ago, I was kind of in a really bad slump, for me. And yeah, I was just real inconsistent. And last couple of years, we've been blessed to have some incredible companies come our way. I've got, and I know most pros will tell you this, but I mean, I've used all the equipment out there, just about, and I know to me what's best and what I've used and what hasn't worked well and all that. And the last few years, I've really kind of started, if you will, getting the train back on the tracks and just being more consistent, and not being down there in the bottom, bottom 5 or 10 people of the field. But at the end of the day, to me, probably my largest accomplishment. It's not because it's just obvious, but to me, it's trying to make an impression that I want to make on not only our sport but on the world. The impression of putting your faith, with Jesus and with God and believing and never giving up, and showing what can happen when you do that.
Yeah. Clay, I think everybody's interested. How do you drive your boat?
My wife says like a NASCAR driver. Um, no, my boat is pretty much standard like anybody else's. Um, I started my career with Skeeter, and I had the opportunity to go back with them and to end of 15. and I did, and it's been a huge blessing, man. I run the FXR 20 Pro, and the only thing really different, they don't put a hot foot in it, for me till we get ready to sell it. So I run it with a throttle stick on the side. Um, used to when we had, of course, we still got the key. I just put my arm down on the key and turn it, and put my arm on the steering wheel pretty much like everybody puts their hands on it and steer it. Then to go to the front deck, instead of having to take the time to get and climbing up on the front deck. I've got a platform that a friend of mine that has a machine shop made that basically is even with that step up, and I just basically walk across that platform and step up on the deck, which just makes it faster. When I'm running and gunning, hitting several spots a day, and my boat where a lot of people run the Minn Kota, Ultrex that run Minn Kota products. I run the Ulterra. We usually put an Ultrex on it at the end of the year if somebody wants one when they buy it. But I run the Ulterra, which has got the auto stow and deploy. Just again for the speed fact and for the fact of me being so short on the deck, or I can pull that Ultrex up. But when I'm in a hurry, let's say if I'm running and gunning and pull up and make 10 casts on the brush pile and I'm gone again, if I do that 50 times a day, it just takes me longer trying to pull that trolling motor up. Whereas I can tap the button on the foot switch, have my rod strapped, and I'll be in the driver's seat with it cranked and be moving before the trolling motor. When it gets stowed, I'm ready to go.
There you go. Yeah, I think everybody just wondered that, so I was like, I got to ask that
Well, I'm
question.
glad. I'm glad you did, man. I know what question I'm waiting for. I figure you're going to ask it.
Beyond fishing, you're also an incredible motivational speaker. What's the most moving interaction you've had with a fan or someone who was inspired by your journey?
I've been blessed, so blessed, to have many of those opportunities, many of those times. Probably the most moving one, that actually happened. Anything away from any other ones. The ones that happened person to person, were incredible. But I had one in particular one, and this happened maybe 6 or 7 years ago. My wife and I, we had been married a few years. We were sitting in the recliner one night, of all things, watching a TV show, and just like your message popped up on my, Facebook on my pro page, messages. This message pops up, and essentially the guy, I won't get into the whole story for your time's sake, but essentially the guy tells me that he had started out. He was a very successful entrepreneur. He thought he had more money than he could ever spend. He got hurt in a warehouse, in one of his own warehouses, hurt his back, and he got on pain pills and got addicted, and ended up leading to several other addictions with drugs and alcohol. Lost everything he had, lost his wife and kids and home, basically, and he had gotten to a point in life that he had decided, to end things. And uh, in saying that, he said he pulled up his phone, and I mean he typed me a very detailed message, and he pulled up his phone and he'd actually got a weapon out, and he pulled up his phone going to just text his ex-wife to tell the kids that he loved them because he didn't want them to know what he was going to do. And he said as he opened up his phone, he told me that he had not been on social media for like a month before that. As he pulled up his phone, he said my Facebook page popped up, and he's like, "Who is this guy?" And he said, "Mr. Dyer, after about 4 hours of researching you and watching every video I could find, he said, you gave me, the strength to get up." He said, "I went and I took every bottle of pills I had, poured them down the toilet and flushed them." He said, "I went and got every bottle of alcohol I had and I poured it out, and I destroyed the bottle of garbage." He said, "I went in the house." He said, he opened up his nightstand and he pulled out an old Bible that was dusty. He said, "I dusted the dust off that Bible." And he said, "I got down on my knees on the side of the bed." And he said, "I begged God to forgive me." And he said, he said, "God saved me that night." And he said, "I got on the right road." And he said, it had been a couple of years since this had happened, but he had finally found me. And he said, um, to make a long story short, where he was about to, end it all, he said when he got to doing all that, it encouraged him. And he said that not only had he been clean and sober, but he had gotten his wife and kids and got everything back and had his life on the right track. And I remember as I was reading that, as you could understand why, man, I was sitting there and I had, tears of joy, flowing down my face. And I remember my wife, she said, "Honey, are you okay?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm okay." And she said, "Well, what is it?" And I said, "Well, I want you to read this. I'm not going to tell you." So I handed her my phone and she read it, and she was the same way I was. And I'll never forget, she turned and looked at me and she said, "Honey, you know something?" She said, "While this story and this testimony will never put a penny in our bank account, chances are," she said, "this shows me," she said, "we're doing what we're supposed to do." And, here we were, never met the guy, never been around the guy or anything. And he had supposedly, he had told me he had turned all the social media off on his phone. And what that showed me, Jordan, it showed me the power, the powerfulness and the power that God can do, and the power through prayer and through faith that, when you had turned everything off on your phone, that, God sent sent my profile to him, and it's the only way it could have happened. And so, with that being said, that's one of probably my most memorable to me, times where I was able to touch somebody through my faith without ever even getting to talk to them and meet them. But I've had many come up to me, obviously, and I'm very humbled and very honored every time. People tell me, just like I'm sure you've heard, when people come up to you and say, "I know you've heard this a lot, or you hear this all the time." Well, regardless of how many times I hear it, it still makes my heart beat. And it still, it encourages me to let me know, hey, I'm doing the right thing. We got to keep doing what we're doing.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Fishing is a sport filled with unexpected moments. What's the funniest or most outrageous thing that's ever happened to you during a tournament?
Ah, probably. I'm trying to think. I've had so many crazy times. Hold on one second. Let me grab a drink right quick. Hold on just a second.
Dude, how long have you been here?
um, Jordan, I'd have to say, my goodness, probably one of the craziest, probably one of the funniest things I've had happen. It was actually the first year I got back with Skeeter, and we, I was waiting on the Bass Opens to start. So there was a BFL up here on our home lake, and my wife's like, "Honey, you need to fish that." I said, "Okay." I said, "I think I will." So I just got in my boat, just got it rigged, just got it broken in, and when I went up there for the pre-tournament meeting, this guy that I get drawn out with, I come to realize he is a Marine veteran, and he proceeds to tell me that he deals with PTSD. So the morning we get there and we put in, I tell him, I said, "Listen," I said, "I don't want you to be nervous, but if you ever start getting nervous while I'm driving," I said, "just reach over and touch me on, punch me on the hip." And I said, I said, "I'm not going to drive crazy, but I want you to be comfortable." He said, "Okay." So we're boat like, I draw a boat like, I don't remember now. I want to say it was like boat 10 or 12, something like that. And there's like 60 something boats in the tournament. But when I draw 10 or 12, there's like 6 or 8 boats in front of me. Then there was a gap. Then it was my number. So when we take off, I was going all the way to the dam, which that lake's not very big, but we had about a 10-mile run. Well, in that run, the lake wasn't full pool, but I know the lake well enough to know, I know where I can run, where most people, are a little bit nervous about it. So on the way down there, we caught and passed every boat in front of us, and I was running across some places that probably would have gave most people the pucker factor, but I knew where I was going. Stopped and I get up and I'm on a shad spawn bite. Well, there's this fish going nuts under this dock, and I'm trying to skip a jig under it and all this stuff. And I noticed my co-angler hadn't got up, and I noticed him messing with his tackle. "Man, you okay?" He goes, "Yep, I'm good." That's all he would say was, "Yep, I'm good." Well, I asked him like 3 times. I was like, "Man, you sure you're good?" "Yeah, I'm good." Well, I thought, oh Lord, I have done, I've done upset him. I've done made him nervous. I've done made him have flashbacks, whatever. So he gets up on the deck and he said, Mr. Clay, can I tell you something? And I'm sitting there going, uh-oh, here it comes. I said, yes, sir. You tell me anything you want to. He looked up at me and he said, dude, he said, you may not have a half arm, but don't let anybody ever tell you can't drive a boat. He said, dude, you can drive the fool off the boat. And I got kind of tickled and started laughing at him, and he said, how you handled it, in those curves and in the ways. He said, I never once felt like I was bouncing in my seat. He said, he said, you were a really good driver. So that definitely caught me off guard. I wouldn't expect him, to say that.
Yeah. I've had those times that I fish a lot of Lake Havasu,
Uh-huh.
and I like to spend time in the river. So I'm going over like 3 feet of water in the river channel. My co-anglers are like, the bottom, the bottom. Like, I know.
You can see it.
And that Havasu is just such an incredible place. Like you said, there's always a shad spawn up in the river, and there's so many big fish up there. You can fish current for big smallmouth. It's just a crazy place to fish.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I've never been on Havasu, but I've seen videos of it, and it looks pretty awesome.
You need to make a trip down here.
Well, if I do, you gonna carry me?
Oh yeah, I'll take you. We'll go out. We'll have a time. We'll go wrench on a few in the river.
Well, we'll make that a deal, buddy. We get a chance to get out there. I'm gonna remember you, and I'm gonna get up with you, and we're gonna make it work.
Yeah, that'll be fun. You've been a part of the fishing industry for years. How do you see the sport evolving, and what advice would you give to young anglers who dream of going pro?
The advice that I would want to give, and I've been, like I said, I've been blessed through this for a long time, man. I've seen a lot of changes, in my time. A lot of the people that used to work, for the in industry companies now and for the sponsors, a lot of the ones that worked there when I first got in are retired now, and this, that, and the other. Um, and there's been a lot of good changes. And a lot of times people don't like change. I'll be honest with you. A lot of times I don't like change, until I really figure the change out, if you will. But with that being said, I think some of the changes in the sport have needed to happen. And it's not always easy. It can offend people. It can make people mad. And all that. And with that being said, some of the best advice I feel like I can give, because I've had to do this myself, is an old saying I've always remembered. Of course, is be patient, but also let the dust settle. And I say that old cliche, letting the dust settle, because um, if you really really look, just like everybody talks about how terrible the world is we live in now. And it's got its rough aspects. Don't get me wrong, but when you really get to looking, there's still a lot of good people, left out there. You just kind of got to find them. A lot of times, or kind of got to come in contact. But the same thing is kind of said about fishing. There's when you get as many people in the industry as we have now, um, it's very easy for somebody to get offended, because when you get that many people in the industry, and I'm glad to see it grow. Don't get me wrong. Does it have its tough times? Yeah, but I'm glad to see it grow, because it helps guys like us, to be able to make a career of it. But at the same time, people tend to get, when they see changes, they tend to get mad if it's not what they want. And my hat's off. I mean, I was talking to our head tournament director the other day on a matter, and I told him, I said, dude, I said, one thing, and he knows me well. He knows, I'm, and me and my family well. And I told him, I said, dude, of all the things I can tell you, I said, I'm glad I don't have your job. And he kind of laughed. He said, man, Clay, why is that? I said, dude, I said, you know, for you to try to be fair and you try to be firm and people respect you, I said, in the world we live in today, most of the time, it doesn't matter what you do, somebody's not going to like it. And I said, you got to have tough skin. But I said, the reason I tell you that I'm glad I don't have your job, I said, for instance, when like a tournament director has to call a day because of a weather prediction, and then it end up not doing, near as bad as what they predict it will do. I said, dude, you will never hear me complain at you like if you call a coming or for high wind and then, the lake's just glass. I said, you won't ever hear me coming, complaining on social media or complaining to you because I said, number one, I said, I would not want to be the person that said, you know what? Yeah, we're a bunch of grown men. We're professionals. We know how to drive boats. Let us go. And then you have to be the one to go to that wife or that mom or that reason to let the guys go out. We had one get killed or we had one get hurt. And I said, that's not something anybody wants to do. And so I told him, that I said, you'll never hear me complain, on anything like that or anything else. I'm the type, I don't like controversy. I never have. There's some people that just, it's like they're not happy without it. And the advice I can give young anglers is try to just be classy, try to stand up and be somebody. I know I have a lot of college and high school anglers coming to me and say, man, Clay, how do you land the sponsorships like you do? And what I tell them, is this. I said, look, when you're getting started, if you know how to cut grass, if you know how to rake leaves, if you know how to pick up limbs out of a yard, you'd be surprised how many people there are out there that maybe that have work jobs that keep them working, 16, 20 hours a day, or how many people that are older and retired, that just don't have the energy to get out there and do that. And I said, but you're willing to do it, they're willing to pay you. And I said, you go work, the old fashioned way, go earn it, go work, go save you some money up, go fish tournaments. I said, if you act like somebody and you act respectable and you're very classy like some of the old time pros, if you go do that and you consistently weigh in fish and you act respectable and classy, a lot of the sponsors will come. They'll come find you. So, of all the advice I could give, it would be that. It would be just be patient. It would be to embrace change. There's some change that people just don't like. And the way I look at it, hey, if you don't like it, if that's not for you, then you know, there's been things that's happened that I haven't necessarily liked, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna do my thing. I'm gonna go give it all I've got, and I'm gonna be thankful I can do it.
There you go. Give me 2 seconds. I'm gonna let this dog out of here. I forgot he was
Okay.
under the desk. Get out of here. Yeah, before we got started earlier, he was sleeping under the desk, and I kind of forgot about him.
I've got one kind of the same way right now. She's about 14 or 15 weeks old, and she's in that puppy stage. She's a golden doodle. Me and my wife got, and she is wanting to chew on everything.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a blue heeler border collie mix. He's about to turn 2, but he's a ball of energy. But I take him on the boat with me. He's super good on the boat.
Cool.
Yeah. Let's see. Anglers always have that one fish that got away. Do you have a one that haunts you? What happened and how do you look back on it now?
Oh man, I've lost my fair share, like we all have, dude. But I tell you, actually, it was way back in 1998 or 99. I think it's 98. Excuse me. I was in the I'd qualified for the state championship in the Alabama Bass Federation, and it was a 2-day tournament, and they didn't have a cut back then. Everybody just fished 2 days, and the top 12, I believe it was, made it to the state team. And after the first day, I was in like, if I remember right, like 28th or 30th, but I wasn't, but like, out of 12th place, making the state team to go to the Southeastern Regional. And the second morning, I had 4 in the boat pretty quick, 4 pretty decent fish, and I was like, all right, man, we got to stay the course. Of course, I was young. I wasn't at the time. I wasn't but like 19. And anyway, I'm going down this stretch of bank, and this is back when we didn't have for then I had the best equipment basically you could have. But I'll never forget, man. It was in the fall. I was cranking a crankbait, and the lake we were on, a 3 pounder or 4 pounder was like a 4 pounder on that lake was like a 10 on Gunnersville. I mean, it was big. And about 10 o'clock that morning, I hurled my crankbait through a tree, and I hooked one. I'm like, man, this feels like a good one. And it was about a 6 pounder, and he had the bait sideways in his mouth. And he came up and jumped like twice and stayed on. And I was like, man, if he stayed on already, I should be in pretty good shape. Well, I get him to the boat, dude, and I can see him swimming down the side of the boat, and my co-angler's trying to get to the net. And he comes up, dude, and he like literally just flares his gills and blows his mouth open. And when he does, he just blows my crankbait out.
Oh.
And he was outside the net with that 6 pounder. I knew at the time. I thought, man, that's gonna hurt. And but I didn't realize how far it would keep me from rising up the leaderboard. And after that tournament was over, I looked back, and that fish would have put me in like it wouldn't have won it, but it would put me up, like in seventh or eighth, which I'd have made the state team. With that, just that fish without a coil, it was that big of a deal. So that one, that was years ago, but it's and thankfully due to whatever reason, due to my equipment, being great, in the last several years, I've not lost that great big one, that would have kept me out of a cut or something. I mean, I've lost some fish here and there. Who doesn't? It's one of those things you're not going to catch all of them. But I haven't had that big toad on in the last few years that would put me over the top and had it come off, for equipment reasons or anything.
Yeah, I've had one of those stories. Me and my buddy were fishing just a local tournament, and we're fishing with big swim baits the whole time. And I make this cast. I see a brush pile on my live scope. I cast past. I reel into it, and my rod just bows up. Super. I was using. I think it's an 8 foot Dobbins rod, and I'm just reeling this thing back, and it goes donk.
Red Bull.
Then it was like this fish jumped. It was like maybe like a 5 pound. We still won the tournament with like 16 pounds, but it was like a 5 pounder. It jumped and just shook my bait off. I was like, ooh.
I had I actually wasn't in the tournament. It was practice day, but we were up on Lake Erie. The one I finished 51st in. And I was out the first day of practice. I'm out at Pelee Island, and probably the biggest smallmouth I've ever hooked. I mean, it come up at the end, about halfway into the boat. I had that sucker hook bring him to the boat, and I had him on if I remember right, a drop shot. And of course, back then we didn't have the hooks and stuff we have now. And back then that big joker come up, and when he jumped, he threw my drop shot all the way over my head to the other side of the boat, and he went back down and of course hit the water. And thankfully it wasn't in the tournament. I still wanted it because I wanted a picture of it, but I remember that fish coming up and jumping. And the man, that fish it was really a cool deal because of how high he jumped, being that big, and him turning flips and there, and him throw my drop shot. And I remember thinking, well, just throw it back at me then.
Yeah, I was last year. When I was practicing for the U.S. Open. I had my buddy Cooper with me, and it was first thing in the morning. We go to my first spot to practice at, and he casts I think he was throwing a Ned rig. So he throws it into the middle of this go. His rod bows up. It was maybe like a 4 pounder. Nothing like super big at my hobby, but it was his biggest smallmouth ever. And it starts pulling. It pulls like down on the side of the boat, and it snaps. And his face was priceless. I died laughing on the front deck. He was just sitting. He was like frozen, just looking at his rod. I was like, dude. I felt bad for him, but it was so funny just the way it was priceless. I'll never forget that.
I get tickled sometimes watching me, my stepson's Brandon Lester, and he and I have been frog fishing on Gunnersville before, and we've had those times where first 5 or 6 bites, when they're not getting it real good, they'll blow up. Me and him will swing or we'll miss, and we'll get to laughing at each other, because he'll like I was standing up beside him on the front deck one day, and I had one of my feet up kind of on the edge of the boat. And there's this giant that blew up on it. I thought he had it. Well, son, when he did, I mean, I threw everything into it I had. And when I did, the frog come back, hits me in the head. I stumbled backwards and I look about like I don't know what, trying to keep from falling down. And Brandon looks at me, he's like, "Hammer, you all right?" It wasn't, but just a few seconds later, he was standing behind me, and he didn't realize how close he was to the step on because I was on the trolling motor. He sets the hook, loses his balance, and steps down in the bottom of the boat. He basically lands in the seat. And I turned around and looked at him, and he looked at me, and he said, "Dang, where's the GoPro, man? We need to make a bloopers reel." He said, "Boy, me and you look like we know." He said, "We look like professionals, don't we?"
Yeah, I remember I have a haunting one. So it was what day? It was the second day because I had a co-angler. He lives in Canada, so we're going. It's first thing in the morning. It was a little bit windy in the morning, so I bombed my jig over this flat. And I just feel a little bit of weight. I'm like, okay, that's a fish. I swing. And I'm reeling this fish back. It jumped. It was easily a 6+ pound smallmouth,
Oh,
easy. And it jumps the first time. I'm like, okay, I got it pinned. I get it. It jumps one more time. It shoots my jig back at me and it hits me in the nuts.
oh gosh.
So I was like, I lost a giant and I got hit in the nuts with a 1 ounce jig. So I wasn't doing too good.
Bless your heart. That was 2 strikes. You was about down on that one, wasn't you?
Dude, I was sitting there. I was hunched over. I was like, man, I feel like I'm gonna throw up.
I bet you did. Bless your heart.
Dude, it was cool. That was a fun day though. We caught a lot of fish.
Right.
It was a day, but that fish will forever haunt me because he's like, I see smallmouth like that all the time. But I was like, don't tell me. Don't tell me. I don't want to hear it. That sucks. But we went back up the flat, and then he caught like a 3 1/4 on a drop shot, and then I caught another like 3 something on a little crankbait. But
There you go.
But it doesn't make up for a 6-pounder. So
No, it don't. You kind of salvaged it, but you still that hurt.
it didn't feel good. I hope that never happens again. At the end of your career, when people talk about Clay Dyer, what do you hope they remember most? Not just about your fishing, but about the way you lived your life.
Oh man, you hit the nail on the head, Jordan. I just pray that I make an impact. That when people come up to me of everything they could say, I pray that I made an impact where they say, "Man, that guy right there was a true warrior for Christ. He gave his last breath on this earth, trying to lead every lost soul that he came into contact with, to knowing who Jesus was." And as awesome as all the tournament wins can be, the trophies, the accolades, the plaques, the AOYs, all that. At the end of the day, that's the legacy. That I want people to realize that through faith, when you put your faith in God and you never give up, at what you can accomplish and at what you can overcome.
Yeah. That was a great answer.
Yeah. Well,
Great
thank you,
answer.
man. I appreciate that, buddy.
So I got one more question for you.
Oh, yes, sir. Absolutely.
What was the scariest moment on the water? If you watched my last podcast, Drew Gill, he accidentally ejected his co-angler out of the boat.
Oh, I didn't see that. I have to go back and watch that.
I was crazy. I was in disbelief. But what was your scariest moment on the water?
Probably my scariest moment. As a professional, I think it was in 2015 or 16. I don't know if you're familiar with the Harris chain of lakes in Florida, but the Haynes Creek is a canal that goes from Lake Eustis to Griffin. And by Lord, as the crow flies, it's not like 5 miles to fly if you go over the trees to go from Big Lake Harris over to Griffin. But I was having to go by boat, so I had to run all the way around and lock through. Well, that morning I'm going out the canal, and it had rained, and my boat seats were a little bit wet, and I had on a rain suit, and I wasn't trying to pass the boat. We were in that canal, and I was going around a corner, and when I went to lean to kind of steer, for some reason I wasn't sitting like I should have been or something, but my foot slipped in the seat, and when my foot slipped in the seat, it caused me to go kind of fall to the left. Well, when I fell, I had my arm on the steering wheel. I jerked the wheel to the left, and I was trying, to get to the kill switch and all and jerk it, before we got to the bank. And my co-angler realized what had happened. Well, he reached over trying to steer, and thankfully he was able to get the boat turned enough. But we kind of went up on the edge of the bank in the boat, and I actually went through this tree. And when the boat came to a stop, we were up in behind the bulrushes, sitting up in the transom, the back of the boat, sitting up in a tree. And a lot of these other boats behind us were coming by, but they couldn't see. And of course he was taller than me, so he was trying to get their attention. And thank God, we were both okay. He actually didn't have a scratch on him. I had a couple places on my face where I'd hit the console, and had a couple of busted places on my face. But we were all okay, thank God. The boat was great. You couldn't even tell I'd done anything with the boat. And we ended up having a there was a guy come through that we happened to flag down. And, I was like, look, man, I threw him a tow rope I had, and it took him a couple times of jerking us, but he got us out of that bush and back in the water, and we ended up going back fishing. But, I got out there and checked everything. The boat wasn't taking on water, and I checked it all, and we went fishing. And, of course, I called the tournament director and told him what happened, and I told him, we were good. And he was like, well, if y'all don't need medical attention, I said, no, sir. And I said, we're going back fishing. And at the end of the day, Skeeter and Yamaha, they checked my boat out real well, and my boat wasn't damaged at all. And but that was one of those days that it makes you always just be conscientious that as much as experience as I have driving, and all that, it makes you you've got to always do things at the utmost of safety and at the utmost of your concern.
Yeah. I've had this one time. This is my scariest one. I was running out of the river at Havasu, and I'm on full all the way trimmed up. I'm flying out of here because I had to go weigh in, and it's kind of far away from where we're weighing in the top of the river. And these two big jet boats are coming in at the same time, and there's one channel, so I'm coming at each other. So I trimmed down, I cranked my wheel, and just crashed into the Tulis because it was getting close.
Oh, me.
If I went to the right, the left, there's a bunch of rocks. I would have done something. I'd rather just crash into the Tulis instead of going into the rocks. I had no choice. There was two coming at me, so I just called it that and then just backed out of the Tulis and just kept going.
Did you? Well, I'm glad you were okay. I was going to say, do you think they ever saw you?
I don't know. I hope, but they just kept going. I was like, okay.
So they didn't even come over and check on you after you went to the Tulis?
They just kept driving through the river. I was like, all right.
Bless your heart.
That's Lake Havasu for you. So I was like, yeah, we're just gonna go to weigh-in now.
I don't blame you. I'd been like, yeah, I'm done. Let's go to weigh-in and put it on the trailer. I've had enough for today.
Yeah. And that was my worst day of the tournament too. I caught 3 fish. It was a rough one.
Oh, bless your heart, man.
Almost got squashed by a couple boats. Only caught 3 little guys, and that was it.
Bless your heart, dude. Hope that don't happen to you again.
Hopefully not. I don't plan on spending any more time in that river though. But thanks for being on here, Clay. It was an honor.
Hey, it's my honor, Jordan. And anytime you'd ever like to film with me, man, you just give me a heads up. And just like this time, man, we'll figure out a day it works. And I'm actually glad the day worked out because I was afraid it wasn't going to. We got builders out here trying to work on our house, and one of them's insulation gun that he'd rented wasn't working. And it's one of the things, it was one thing after another, and I was trying to help. And they've been doing a phenomenal job, but things have been a little chaotic lately, trying to get everything ready to go and building a house and all that. But yeah, anytime, man, you want to do a podcast, brother, it'd be my honor to come on with you, buddy. And I appreciate you, and you've done a great job, man. I appreciate the opportunity with you.
Thank you, Clay. Have a great day, buddy.
Hey, you too, man. God bless you, buddy. Bye-bye.